Da tar vi fatt på første del av konferansen. Denne delen har vi kalt «Hvordan vi lever». Urbanisering og digitalisering skjer jo raskere enn noen gang. Halvparten av menneskene på kloden bor allerede i byer, og dette ser vi bare mer og mer av. Men hva er egentlig en god by, og hvordan bygger vi den? Drømmen om de smarte byene er ofte drevet av ny teknologi, og det knytter seg for eksempel store forventninger til digitaliseringen faktisk, av mye av det som foregår i byene våre. Men hvordan bestemmes egentlig retningen på den teknologiske utviklingen? Og hva er egentlig teknologi? Vi står jo i dag i en situasjon hvor det er blitt svært tydelig for mange at Einstein nok en gang hadde rett, når han sier at vi kan ikke løse problemene våre ved å tenke på den samme måten som vi gjorde da vi skapte dem. Og i denne delen av konferansen skal vi se på mulige alternativer, nye måter å tenke på. Stay human. Det menneskelige handler ofte om sunt folkevett. Hva er for eksempel egentlig målet med å utvikle ny teknologi? Og hvis målene har endret seg, og det har de jo flere ganger siden den industrielle revolusjonen, så må jo den teknologiske tenkningen, altså det vi forstår med teknologi, også endre seg. Stay human. Mange av dagens byer er åpenbart ikke laget for at mennesker skal trives i dem. Det er helt andre hensyn som ligger bak beslutningene i byutviklingsprosessene, ofte med katastrofale konsekvenser både for mennesker og miljø. Hva gjør vi med det i praksis? Stay human. Byene på kloden vokser, og de blir større og tettere. Men hva er det egentlig som holder byen sammen? Kan de store byene lære noe av det som faktisk fungerer i små bygdesamfunn på små steder, for eksempel i Norge? Neste foredragsholder kommer fra Newcastle, så jeg går over til engelsk. In too many areas we are still stuck in the industrial mindset of the 19th century. We imagine a linear, progressive form of development where problems arise and are solved along predictable trajectories, and where economic growth and human prosperity are based on the extraction of natural resources, and where technologies are quickly translated into profitable industries. But there are other ways of thinking. Rachel Armstrong is Professor of Experimental Architecture at Newcastle University. Her work focuses on establishing conditions for a living architecture that couples the computational properties of the natural world with building structures and infrastructures. Rachel Armstrong is a Rising Waters II Fellow with the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation and a Senior TED Fellow. She is the director and founder of the Experimental Architecture Group, whose work has been published, exhibited and performed at events worldwide. And she is coordinator for the Living Architecture Project, which is an ongoing collaboration of experts from universities in the UK, Spain, Italy and Austria. She has written a number of academic books, as well as works of fiction. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to have your minds blown. Please welcome Rachel Armstrong.
Thank you, Ingerid, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk about the evolution of a platform to help catalyze a new phase of human development where our impacts of living start to work along with nature. We constitute now a geological scale force that is altering the character of our world by reducing its vigor through the side effects of human development. Now, this Anthropocene is characterized by noxious greenhouse gas-choked skies, depleted soils, and plastics-riddled oceans. Irrefutable evidence that we are the cause of our present ecological crisis. Now, wedded to the fossil fuel industry and industrialization, modern architecture itself is responsible for 40% of our current carbon footprint. And our homes are sites for this activity, which is laid bare in the mechanical infrastructures in the ISS, which reinforces Le Corbusier's dictum that our homes are machines for living in. And these machines are apparatuses that support the habits of modern life. And it's this modern lifestyle that's fueling the power of the Anthropocene. Now, despite patches of preserved greenery in our public spaces and parks, our modern cities, just like machines, are inherently hostile to life. Industrial construction techniques smother fertile soils with tar macadam and concrete, replacing them with altered chemistry of brownfield sites, where industrial organic wastes are disposed of, rather than holistically recycled, reused, and reintegrated within new contexts. With no active soil-making processes in our cities to generate rich composts, organic waste turns city sewage systems into rancid soups, which are soaked with unmetabolized medications like hormones, neurotransmitters, and are clogged with fatbergs. Rivers and estuaries get the brunt of these effluents and cause algal blooms to flourish, starving marine environments of oxygen and causing ecosystems to crash. No matter how carefully and considerately we use our machines, at the scale and the intensity that we are currently using them, we are heading towards the sixth great extinction. There have been 5 mass extinctions before on this planet. All of them have been caused by natural disasters. The 6th great extinction is the first extinction that will be brought about by an organism alone. And interestingly, the artist's rendering of the great dying during the Permian epoch has many of the symptoms of the 6th great Anthropocene that caused ocean oxygen levels to plummet and caused this dead zone, a great dying that lasted 5 million years before the biodiversity of the planet recovered. So how might we start to go about to turn around our impacts? And I'm going to paint a picture of an alternative technological platform that works differently from our modern machines, one that's capable of performing a whole bunch of vital tasks which are needed to maintain our healthy lifestyle. And we know it's tried and tested, as it's been around for potentially over 3.5 billion years. And that technology is life itself. We have learned how to take nature's capabilities of maintaining a state of livability on this planet for granted. And we're blind to the incredible work that it does. In his fantastic book, Dirt, the Ecstatic Skin of the Earth, William Bryant Logan observes that an acre of fertile land performs a horsepower of work every day. That's a horsepower of cleaning the air, removing impurities from the water, oxygenating it, feeding the plants, producing heat, making biomass. This is not trivial, it's vital. And it's not done by modern machines. But modernity has taught us how only to see the machine as having the value of a technology. And it treats nature as other than us humans. And because of this otherness, the living world is not only treated as something that can be ethically consumed by machines, it's also not given any meaningful agency of its own. Now, to turn this paradigm around, we need a technical platform that, when we innately use it, changes our attitudes and impacts towards the care and responsibility for the environment. So this means, in making a transition from the industrial to an ecological age of architectural practice and practice of the built environment, the fundamental units of design must be reconsidered. So rather than inert blocks of geometrically configured matter like bricks, blocks, modules, and lattices, materially dynamic and responsive elements are needed. So in 2008, I set out to identify some kind of unit or technological platform that might start to show how work can be done without needing the framework of machines to imagine and operate it. And this is a lot harder than it may first seem, because the machine's not just a technology, it's a metaphor that can describe all kinds of things through its own terms of reference, including life itself. So I looked to the origin of life sciences to identify chemical assemblages, complex arrangements of molecules that are simpler than cells, but are also capable of lifelike behaviors, as you're seeing in this picture. And what you're seeing is a background that's olive oil, and the little white dots in the middle are simply alkali. It's a very primitive metabolism. What it does is it makes long structures of soaps. Now, I'm not saying that this is a technological system itself, but it's a platform through which we can start to see how non-mechanical systems start to produce structure, perform conditions of work. And what's notable about this system is that the little bodies themselves, the agents, are sensitive to their environment, they respond to their context, they generate lifelike patterns that cannot be distilled into any discrete phenomena, but they also perform a range of recognizable activities with many variations. And they're even capable of surprising us. And so they kind of live together in communities that can actually transform into new configurations. So since they are so varied and shape-shifting and like nailing jellies to the wall, you have to ask the question, well, how on earth can we start to work with something like this? Well, we can do that by changing both the internal conditions of these systems and the external conditions. And we can even do this where we start to visibly scale this to the human and architectural dimensions. So in 2010, I worked with Philip Beasley on the Hylozoic ground installation at the Venice Biennale, and created these little metabolic knots of matter that could remove small amounts of carbon dioxide. It's not geoscale engineering or anything. Small amounts of carbon dioxide and turn them into a sculptural system within the gallery itself. Now, this showed that these metabolisms were very plastic, and it depended on where you placed them as to what kinds of things they did. So the Future Venice project used a different system to examine how these protocells could act as semi-organismal masses whose bodies would thicken in response to the rising water levels and complex changes in physical, chemical, biological, and human systems. And so, whilst the drawings show a speculative action of these tiny protocells that create mineralized reefs, there were actually assemblages of real living knots of biology and chemistry. These are like thrombolites along the sides of Venice that are produced spontaneously by the city, but they're not gardened or shaped or choreographed in any way. So the idea was then that these protocells could engage with the natural reef-making systems around the foundations of Venice and could actually construct new forms of land through reef-like structures, as shown in this sketch here. Now, in this work, what we found was that the protocells are extremely complex systems. For example, here they have swarmed around alcohol and they become incredibly vigorous for a while, which is why they've gathered together in a lump. And then after a short period, they become very inert and then sit there as inert structures. So the thing that this enforces, it means that these non-linear systems require artistic research methods to ensure the appropriateness of the work. They're incredibly complex, they're situated. It depends on all kinds of things as to how they progress. And this is beyond the realm of scientific, technological innovation and development. We have to start figuring out how these agents with an inner living force can engage with humans and a much more diverse agentized environmental system. So we need to think about the language, the framework through which we can operate with these tiny little beings, let's say. So what we started to do was to think in terms of computation. And by dividing a site into a range of spaces, we could then think of them as being like punch cards into which we could place catalysts. And this is work that was done in the Year 6 Master's Programme by Matthew Sharman-Hales, where we looked at producing an analog, spatialized, multi-material, bottom-up-led form of construction to produce protocols for forms of architecture that were capable of growth in the canals, because that is where the infrastructure of life, the water and the air and the metabolic exchanges can take place. And this kind of soft system had been already engaged imaginatively before by the lighting company Philips in their microbial home, who started to imagine how a kitchen could be a self-sustaining organic system using microbes and composting processes to power kitchen appliances like this gas burner that feeds on compost. At the time, this was a speculative project which was crowdsourced in the community. Now, working with protocells made me realize that we actually needed a much broader range of programs that we could use to construct more complex outcomes from the actions of metabolic units. And so looking to the bacterial world, inspired by Lynn Margulis, whose observation that the planetary organism, the biogeosphere, was mediated through the actions, the metabolic actions of bacteria. And so I worked to produce the Living Architecture Project specifications for the EU Horizon 2020 Future Emerging Technologies Research and Innovation Programme. And this is still in build phase, but it's essentially a prototype wall for a bathroom or a kitchen with a programmable metabolism capable of processing liquid waste in a home into useful substances. And the following images that you'll see is work in progress, because the project isn't going to be delivered until April 2019. But perhaps the best way to describe the Living Architecture Project is not as a bookcase-sized apparatus that sits within your kitchen, but more like a cow stomach, a metabolic digestive process that possesses an inner life, and it gurgles and feeds on the liquid waste that it's fed. And these are moved into different chambers, like in a cow's stomach, where it is transformed into electricity, inorganic matter, phosphate, polished water, oxygen, and heat. And the end waste product is biomass, which can also be used as a range of composting techniques. This is the system diagram that we have developed. And in the middle, you can see the little stomachs that are being fed by the effluent waste in the sediment tank. It's being boosted by oxygen from algae in the green boxes. And at the bottom, all the products are tapped off out of the system, including polished water. So the first prototype systems were these living bricks, which for the first time started to bring metabolic process together with structure. And as you can see, they have a metabolism that can produce enough electricity to power a meter. And these are specifically a microbial fuel cell. Later, we then started to integrate different kinds of metabolism. So there's a green light-loving metabolism on the outside here, and in the little black tubes, there are the anaerobic metabolisms characteristic of the microbial fuel cell. In other words, we're starting to put together microbial apps, like little microbial programs whose chemistries start to talk to each other and start to create chain reactions, almost like a designed ecology or a physiology within a building. Now, the thing is that when you've got little creatures that are performing alongside of you, you can't treat them as if they were just inert. That is, let's say, taking away the agency of nature, and we want to restore that. And this is, again, where the artistic research methods come in. Now, how do we actually start to acknowledge the inner life of things? How do we start to work with that in art and design? So this next project is the Brick Dialogues, which is a collaboration with Rolf Hughes. This one specifically was for the Adaptive Architecture exhibition at Nottingham Trent University. And it cast the matter within living bricks as characters from Shakespearean narratives. So this is Caustic Ophelia. It's a perspex bricks, an open coffin for Ophelia's splendid organic material body, which is slowly decomposing in the gallery as the tragic heroine's material namesake drowns in her own soils and soft surroundings. And through headphones, and I'll play it in a minute, the audience hears these multiple voices that start to decompose through the headphones. And so it's transforming the classic tragedy into a new beginning through the composting process.
The Brick Dialogues.
Stop it here.
Caustic Ophelia. Let us acknowledge it. A spore of pollen inside a balloon, glass of fashion, mould of form, a drum inside a bloody room, the whole world becoming stone.
I'll stop it there because it's about 3 minutes long and I suspect that we'll run out of time if I play any more. But we've developed a series of these. This is Cracked Hermione for Women in Power National Trust Cragside Film Project, which is directed by Benjamin Wigley. And it's a brick dialogue, which is about building soils by hand on another planet, which is linked to the cycles of life and death. And in the narrative, it's really about taking care of the spaces that we live in and thinking about the metabolic networks with which we construct our spaces. Now, appreciating the inner life of agentized spaces was extended to the unquiet earth from Victoria Tunnel to quantum tunneling installation for the Being Human Festival, actually in Newcastle. And in collaboration with Culture Lab and the Usburn Trust, the experimental architecture group took over this decommissioned colliery transport space and brought it to life with a soundscape and narrative. So led by the undead, visitors were taken on a tour of the spaces to experience the tunnel giving birth itself. And that was through the material formations that had spontaneously happened, these stalactites and stalagmite formations that have seeped through the earth and changed the original brickwork, together with some theatrical techniques, let's say. And during Temptations of the Nonlinear Ladder at the Palais de Tokyo in 2016, this paradigm was inverted, where the living space provoked transformations in the bodies of circus artists. Now, we chose circus artists because they're different bodies that move differently in space. And if you have weird spaces, why would you want conventional or militarized bodies? So in this work, essentially, the bodies went under this transformation between earth, water and air, catalyzed by the presence of medaka fish, which are the only creatures that have successfully bred with backbones on the International Space Station. So through the performance, there was this blending of human with others, which was really an evolutionary tale of how we are not only shaping our environments, but as Winston Churchill once said, our environments shape us too. Now, the following images really are provocations rather than illustrations of work. And so essentially, when we kind of understand that our spaces could themselves be living, and our buildings become like bodies, and they will sound and smell like them, we need to figure out how we engage and create meaningful relationships with them. So as our understanding engagement with non-linear materials in design and engineering becomes more sophisticated, artists and designers will be able to choose and nurture specific metabolisms within a site. Now, this will alter our lifestyles and the way that we inhabit our homes. And founded on mutual relationships between microbes, which are already in our guts, and humans, our living architectures will be deeply influenced by the way we treat our home. In exchange for being sensitive to the system's wellness, the development of different kinds of apps will enable us to meet specific needs, such as producing medicines, recycling organic matter into edible biomass, or producing livable amounts of electricity and heat. And while local conditions and resource availability constrain their performance, desired outcomes, such as generating bioluminescence, could be unexpected side effects of living in these spaces to provide low-level, mood-elevating lighting, for example. Now, combinations that do not operate as expected, because that is one of the side effects of life, it finds a way around things. We can try and constrain their feedstocks or remove certain units, and let's say choreograph the decisions in metabolic outputs. So in other words, we become co-designers of these spaces. However our living architectures are deployed, they will require us to get to know the personalities of our houses. And today, we assess these microbial worlds in sterile laboratories, but by providing a day-to-day interface with these metabolic landscapes, we'll become familiar with them. So we will instinctively find ways of programming and re-relating to our homes as our daily tasks change. And these will be very different to machines, particularly in the sense that living architectures will wake up with us. They'll go to sleep when we do. They will cope with our intimate habits, and they will even be enlivened by our return after a holiday break and act as if they were pleased to see us. Through the care and conscious design of their metabolisms, inhabitants of these living architectures will differently understand the character of our homes, what they can do, and what their responsibilities are for them. Now, domestic buildings will no longer be a projection of our own desires, but beings in their own right, that belong as much as a community as we do. Capable of evolving alongside other beings, their metabolic exchanges will not just be at the heart of an environmentally concerned architectural practice, but comprise the very core of the worlding process that gives rise to an increasingly lively world. As the values of substrates and the processing sites themselves increase, our homes, more like tea house Tetsu here than Corbusier's machine, may link together through communities to reverse the impacts of industrial resource consumption in cities by returning spent matter back into the infrastructures that shape the livable world. And as our technologies further develop, a diverse range of microbial and bioreactor choices will become available so that our homes and cities are not homogenized or universalized, but continue to enhance the quality of urban environments, a bit like speciation. To achieve this, we do need more advances in the kind of bioreactor types that we use. For example, we could use artificial reefs and mangroves to increase biodiversity beyond the home, so our homes become semi-permeable to nature. They might clean the water and stabilize land erosion. So with the right governance, networks of bioprocessing units will begin to benefit ecosystems, remediate our ailing atmospheres, and ultimately improve the health and well-being of cities and their inhabitants. So as we search for our version of Arcadia, an ancient vision of pastoralism and harmony with nature, in this case drawn here by Dan Slavinsky, we will see benefits for generations to come. They may include a healthy biosphere by increasing the biological quality of urban environments through the production of microbial biomass to make native urban soils. And ultimately, they may even replace all domestic fossil fuel-powered appliances. The major waste outputs of these living living cities will be cleaner waterways and composts, which enable more green plants in metropolitan locations to become established. And with the increase of natural vegetation, urban climates will become moderated to reduce heat island effects, produce oxygen, conserve water, improve soil quality, sequester carbon dioxide, and trap dust particles. In effect, the living technologies underpinning our buildings will enable human development to become more compatible with natural processes. Of course, this journey is nowhere near concluded, but the fusion of biology, technology, and art speaks of different kinds of beginnings, where we can imagine, build, and explore futures that may one day entirely wean us off our umbilical attachment to fossil fuels, while diversifying the metabolic richness and flourishing on Earth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I told you you would have your minds blown. This also, similar to the previous speaker, didn't make things any simpler. But to my mind, it's extremely optimistic and actually very, very vad heter det för något? Uppmuntrande. Encouraging to see someone who takes the biological nature of human life and human construction to such a degree as what you do in your work. I'm particularly intrigued about the connection with art. And the role of art, the function of art in the work that you do and in the investigations. Your stuff is, as you said, beyond science. It is messy. It is even ugly. And so, can you say something just about the role of art in all of that?
Yeah, I think that I think art is absolutely critical, particularly artistic research, in the sense of how do we build new paradigms for living, and that's not a scientific question. Maybe some groups in kind of, let's call it, world debate think that science is the answer to everything. But I think that without an artistic dimension, without inventing the languages, without inventing, let's say, the systems of care, without introducing qualities for inhabiting spaces more kindly and sensitively, and they treat us that way back, we will just keep on feeding biology into Corbusier's machine as little soft components. And I think that we desperately need a rupture in the character of our thinking. And so I think that even biodesign up until this point is still a soft version of many modern approaches. It's following the kind of the printing and making techniques that don't unleash this radical transformational potential that biology has. And the same with modern biology, you know, from molecular biology all the way to synthetic biology. It's been in the service of industry. It's funded by industry. It becomes a little industry. And I think it's art that can create the radical moment through which life is not a machine. It can be viewed as a machine. It is not a machine. And we have to unleash that bubble so that we can do something radical and new. And that's important. If we don't, we're headed toward the sixth great extinction. We can't let that happen.
Thank you very much, Rachel Armstrong.